Hello and welcome to the Over It podcast. I volunteered as tribute. I'm Suzanne Kohlberg, joined by
me. I'm Kristan Kershaw.
And this is my own podcast. I'm not sure, is it the same for you?
Yeah, totally.
How long have you wanted to do a podcast for?
It's been in the periphery for a number of years, but not me taking myself seriously that I could actually do it until maybe the last couple, really.
I've wanted a podcast since I first came across podcasting in 2015. I had no idea what I'd talk about, but I wanted one because I just find them so beneficial because I am lazy or efficient, if you want to say it in a more nicer way. So I like to multitask. So I love listening while I walk or while I do the dishes or anything like that. So basically, we called, I'm going to put you on the spot, Kristan. Why do we call this podcast Over It?
Well, because both of us, while we come from completely different backgrounds and our work is different, we both end up helping people to navigate past hurdles. And there's a bit of, I'm over living this way. I'm over whatever the thing is. So how are we going to transition past that? And you and I both have different, you've got a slightly different stance or perspective, which you've come from and landed on that. But I think we both end up at times where we're like, so over this insert situation here.
On that note, that's a great intro. I should say for everyone listening, we have no script. We're literally just rolling with it. It's going to be a one take, no fake. So as I said, efficient. So not really into editing. And if you have sensitive ears, I highly recommend earbuds because if you've never heard me talk before, I'm a bit of a sweary fairy.
Yes. Headphones of some sort or listening when little ears are not around, highly recommended.
Yes. So when did we first meet? It was funny. Before we hit record, we were trying to work this out and we can't. So we don't have like one of these meet cute stories that's fascinating. Like it's really bizarre. Most people in my life, I can remember roughly where or when I met them. But it was just kind of like, no.
I reckon it was either 2017 or early 2018, I think. I had joined some women in business network type groups to start to learn. I'd been in business for a long time. And it's funny you mentioned the podcast and taking it where you go. I've been listening to one sort of podcast or another for so long, and I love audiobooks and all that sort of thing. So I had an Audible subscription before they were even available in Australia via the US Audible. So from like 2008 or something. So I love listening to things and hearing other people's stories, and often biographies are what get me interested in how other people have solved their situations or just sharing their stories, because I think humans connect through stories and understanding and reflecting back and all that sort of stuff. So I went, all right, well, if I really want to succeed in business, I feel like I need to start to join the networking groups, not to go and share my wares, but I actually went in with the goal to get people to help me in my business. I knew that I was going to need help in other ways, that in things I didn't have the skills in. And so I went to be a silent observer, and I really love people watching. So it was just another people watching, but instead of sitting somewhere in public and people watching, it was in a Facebook group, and gradually got to know different people, including you.
I love that. I love it so funny when you said sell their wares. Two things came to mind. One, in that particular group, it was 6 months before I ever made an offer, even though they had an offer day every week. I think that's the introvert in me. And the second thing is I recently rewatched Aladdin with my children. And if anybody hasn't watched it recently, the cartoon version, they have put an apology at the beginning, which I was really impressed with. Anyway, we can end up on a tangent. I'll leave that, but just saying you could check it out. But apparently Robin Williams, who sings the initial song, mostly ad-libbed it, and they gave him something, and the line is like, oh, this will never break, it broke. Selling you wares. As I said, I end up on tangents, but yeah, so we don't really remember how we met. Somewhere in the online business world around 2017, because then we've met in person. We went on a retreat together, and that was last year. But have we met in person before that? Because it felt like we had, but then again, I think that's the gift of Zoom.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't know that we had, But it does feel like we had. So, I mean, if we had, it would have been at a big event, like everybody coming together. There'd been no smaller events that we'd come to.
So we
Because
can't have then, because I very rarely go to big events. I've been to one,
Yeah.
I think, since you and I have known each other. I know you didn't go to that one because we were talking about it once. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's just bizarre how, you know, things come to be. So we both have our own businesses. We're both mums. And what I'm really excited about, you know, with this collaboration is we both have very different opinions of things. And I was just talking to a client this morning, and she was saying how it's valuable to hire or work with or converse with people who do have different opinions to you, to expand your horizons and know that you can have that mutual understanding and respect, even if you don't agree.
Yep. Yep, totally. And one prime example of that is, we were just talking about before, is our kids, right? So I have 3 kids. One is soon to turn 10, and the other 2, just a few days before we're recording this, have turned 16. And so, yes, there are twins, and yes, there's 3 in total. And I will freely talk about situations and whatever to a degree, but I won't be releasing their name in general, because I want them to have their own digital identity that they can control and whatever. I don't need their employer going, oh, your mum was talking about you and putting pictures up of you. So you won't generally, except for a few on social media that have been out and about, very specifically selected, you won't see pictures of them. And that's just the choice that I make. Whereas Suze, I see awesome pictures of your kids, but the thing is that we respect each other. Like, I'm not offended because Suze chooses to, but you're not offended because I choose not to. So
yeah, I love it when people contact me with the best of intentions, saying like, I've shared the kid's surname, or I've shared their school, or I've shared something. Like, I understand security and I appreciate their concerns, but I'm also like, my address is all over the internet. If somebody really wants to stalk me, they can. Not that I'm encouraging it, but I just hold a different standpoint, and I appreciate you're like, you don't want to put a digital footprint in that they didn't have a say in. And I'm like, the digital stuff's everywhere, so it is what it is. And yeah, I just think that that's something that goes to show you can have totally different opinions on things and still have awesome connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've always had great discussions on so many different topics. And I think that's what, ever since the early, and I sometimes identify myself as an extroverted introvert. So I can do extroverty things like have a conversation with someone I don't really know or whatever. It's not comfortable. I don't always love the initial part, but once I warm up, I'm okay. But I tell you what, I get to a certain point and then I'm like, nope, I need my me bubble, and everybody leave me alone bubble, including my family, you know, just let me recharge away. So there's a lot. I think we both probably have sat in the periphery of some of the areas where we've been in common, in not just the main group that we first met in, but some of the other areas. And we've just sat and observed and had great conversations. And I think that's what we're going to be able to bring to this, is such diverse conversations and commonality and yet differences, and share our journeys as mums, as business owners, as so much else, as coaches. So it's pretty exciting, really.
I love that. And I love the I was going to say introverts. We'll have to have a whole episode on that, because even we're not even going to agree on that, people, because when someone says to me they're either an ambivert or an extroverted introvert, I'm like, no, you're an introvert or an extrovert in Suze's point of view, because it's about how you recharge. And I love, love, love when people try and tell me that I'm an extrovert. It's like I'm an introvert. It's how I recharge. I love my alone time. It doesn't mean that I can't speak. It just doesn't mean it doesn't liven me up. Whereas my son, Casimir, is the world's biggest extrovert. Like, in our really long lockdown last year, he'd literally wait at the front door. And when the mail lady came, he'd go flying out. He'd social distance people. Don't panic. Every day, and like chat her ear off while our one here has a bicycle. So I'm like, that's so good for fitness. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, like people, he was like starved. And all the people who told me that lockdown must be great for introverts, it's like, no, I want to be alone. There was 4 months where I was not alone at all. And I love my family. I don't always like them.
It's funny you should say that. The 5-week first lockdown that we had was like a living hell for me, because even though we have an upstairs downstairs type thing here, and my office is downstairs and the rest of the family were mainly upstairs, they were still in my space. And I mean, you know, we were all under stress because of the situation that it was. It was only 5 weeks, but it was so hard to get kids learning and maintain work and like it felt like I had the encroachment right around my little bubble, as far as that space that I'm so used to being able to just go upstairs if I want. And I don't do it much. It seems so petty to say, but energetically, or whatever you want to identify it as, it really made a big difference. So I totally resonate with that. And when they went back, I'm like, okay, off you go now. Bye.
And I think this lends perfectly into the whole theme of our podcast, becoming over it. Sometimes external circumstances force us to face something that may have been percolating in the background anyway, whether it be a health scare, or not necessarily a scare, a health thing that props up, a financial thing, a loss of a job, a relationship. There's so many things that we don't realize how much we're just kind of putting up with or getting by until something happens, like that literal straw that breaks the camel's back. And it's like, I just don't want to live like this anymore.
And that's often the point at which you really can enact change that's lasting change. And it may be that you've had something that's reoccurred in your life time and time again, and habits and ingrained things that you don't even realize that you do subconsciously the same way every single time. But it's often those scenarios, again, whether it's health or otherwise, where you suddenly go, I don't want to live this way anymore. For me, it was a health-related thing to do with the youngest of my kids. But that then has led out into so much more about how I work, how I interact with other people, how I respond to stressful situations. Like the me of today, I've always been fairly chilled and not wanting to be in reactive situations. But when a stress hits me now, I respond in such a different way. And that's all come because of a health thing many, many years ago. So it can, and I'd had plenty of opportunities to change before that, but it hadn't been a high enough priority to make different choices until then.
And I think that's the thing. It's a high enough priority. So things can be annoying. Like if you were sitting on an ant's nest, and provided you weren't allergic, like anaphylaxis, but you were being stung, you're like, that's uncomfortable. That hurts. How many stings do you have to have before you're like, I'm going to move? And with health things, or it could be finance, relationships, with so many areas of our life, we tend to set ourselves up for failure by doing this all or nothing. Like, I'm going to start on Monday, or I'm going to budget and never spend, or I'm going to eat only these things and never go over, or I'm going to exercise for this much, or I laugh, I'm going to take my supplements. And, Kristan and I have spoke before about the supplement graveyard, the back of your pantry where you buy the things and never actually use them. And I think, what do you think, for people you've worked with or for yourself, that differentiates between this is actually the time and this is another thing that's going to last for maybe 2 weeks and then be like, no?
I think when you do little steps, and in my work I particularly encourage people to go in the most baby of micro steps. You do too, in a slightly different way, but it's okay, do one thing different for 1 week. Okay, that seems achievable. And then you can add another thing the next week, and then suddenly 2 little changes and you're going, oh, I don't feel too bad. Maybe I'm sleeping a bit better, or I'm a bit less anxious, or whatever. And suddenly that, initially you might have to sort of push yourself a little bit, put sticky notes everywhere or put a reminder on your phone or whatever. But these little things then lead to you going, oh, hang on, I forgot that. And you remember because your body is actually calling for it, and you're going, that makes me feel better. So your body is proactively, and suddenly the perspective shifts. And then you're building into your own little momentum, which you're going, hang on, I'm the one that's in control of this, not someone else being the guru for me or someone else telling me what to do. I'm in control. And I think ultimately most humans want to be in control of their life. And when the wheels come off and we're not, that's when we feel at our worst. So by doing some of the little changes that I certainly talk about, and I know, again, you do your own version of that, when we feel like we've actually got some tiny snippet of control of the steps in our lives, even if it's literally going with the flow on something rather than controlling every micro step, it's liberating. And then you go, I can do this. And suddenly the positive side of what you're doing becomes positively reinforcing rather than the negative self-talk going, well, I've never been able to stick my supplement, so I'm not going to succeed. Not that we've ever had that discussion. Hey, Suzanne.
No, not that that'll be a podcast episode eventually. But I love what you touched on there. And I think we've called the podcast Over It, but I think in some ways, allowing ourselves to get to the point of being over it is often the issue, in that we are so sick of ourselves, we try and change everything at once, which is unsustainable. Like, we've all been there and we all know that.
Yeah.
And then when someone says just change one or two little things, see how that feels, change more, we are so desperate for change. We're so hungry for change that we're like, well, what's that ever going to do? It's so small. So with over it, what Kristan and I mean is not over it as in like fix my life, because sorry, people, this is not a hot take. Neither Kristan nor I can fix your life. That's your job. We can guide, make suggestions, be on board, hold space, but nobody's going to come and save you. And I remember feeling that one day, because I used to weigh twice what I do now. I was like, nobody's going to come to save me. And like my princess archetype was a little pissed, but the rest of me was like, so I have to save myself. And it just felt really liberating. So over it is not over it as in like I'm kicked to the curb. Over it is like I'm overdoing all or nothing. I'm over, handing my power to a program, a pill, an MLM, somebody else, because this is the thing. And I get really passionate about this. As a former yo-yo dieter, I would be like, this works. Weight Watchers works. Jenny Craig works. Herbalife works. I'm the fat, lazy fuck who can't keep going. And so we're giving our power. We're giving them the power of, when I follow it to the letter, I lose weight. So it's a good thing. But my question for anyone who felt like that is that this is the biggest wake-up call for me. If it really worked, why couldn't I stick with it? Why did I fall off? I'm not lazy or unmotivated, because if I truly was, why would I have tried again and again and again? If you're truly a lazy, unmotivated person, you wouldn't be listening to this. You wouldn't be looking for the next thing. You'd just be like, nah, this is my life now.
You'd resign yourself and there are some people that do that, and that's their choice, and maybe they're happy that way, maybe they don't recognize that they're not happy that way. But absolutely, when you're a seeker, there's something more to it. You just haven't found what that is that will help you. You haven't found the silver bullet, and we're not saying there's a silver bullet, but your body on some level, probably really deep inside, knows that there's actually something that you can do to help you get long-term change and all that sort of thing. The thing is that most of us don't recognize that we've got an intuition inside of us that can help us to understand ourselves and understand how we tick and make choices, whether it's food, whether it's stress, whether it's work, whether it's exercise. It doesn't matter what the moving parts are. We've got it in us. It's just understanding the barriers that we are culturally conditioned to. And so often I hear of, especially women, but anyone, they go to the doctor and I'm so tired. Well, you're just the parent of X kids, or you're just getting older, and they get spoken down by the physician, and the physicians are trained to go in a certain way. It's not necessarily that they're trying to be a downer on where the person is at, or they give them an antidepressant because they're tired. And it's like, well, hang on, did you look into that a little bit more on the lifestyle or whatever? It depends on the experience of that practitioner. But the reality, some of the most liberating things for clients that I work with or have spoken with who have, taken control of their health and their well-being, is to hear that they're not imagining it, that there's a reason for it, and understanding. And so for anyone who hasn't read the bio and understood, I focus on minerals in what I do and understanding what stress has to do with that. And so what we eat, what we do, all that sort of stuff, how it all connects. Just to understand that there's a reason for feeling tired beyond you've got kids, you're at that age, you're whatever. That in itself, you mean that I'm not imagining it? Because that cultural thing actually undermines our own belief in ourselves, because we've gone to them going, I don't feel right. And they've just gone, no, ignore that intuition. You're okay.
Well, the people I work with, or my past experience, was always put on your weight. Like, have you thought about losing some weight? Like, what a derogatory thing to say to somebody who struggles with their weight. I remember once having quite a bad chest infection and going to the doctors, getting a whole lecture about my weight and being sent on my merry way. I'm like, are you going to listen to my chest? I later ended up in hospital with pneumonia. So there is that. But I think, it's almost like a form of medical gaslighting. It's like, oh, you're of that age, you've got young kids. And we're not saying by any means don't go see a doctor, like nothing at all like that. But you know your body better than anybody else, and you need to advocate for that. And there are times when, and recently in my program, we have a conversation about pain. I've got chronic back pain for the listeners. And I remember it was before I got pregnant, 2012, I had dropped 60 kilos at that stage. And I'd had a back injury. And anyway, there was nothing they could do. The doctors were just telling me kind of rest, which anyway, I went to a health expo because, as you do, I was wandering around and I came across a chiropractor, and I have been Western medically trained. So I've done 5 years of a Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery, whole story for another episode. Anyway, we had been trained that chiropractic is just no.
Right.
But I was in so much pain. And this is the thing, when you're desperate, you'll try anything. And I had the conversation, and she just was getting me to look in the mirror and see how one of my shoulders was higher than the other, which I hadn't even noticed. And anywho, I tried a lot of things. I was like, what's the harm? Went and had an adjustment, felt a shift immediately. After 3 adjustments, felt heaps better. I remember her asking me about my pain, and I'm like, oh, I just have my normal pain now. And she's like, excuse me. And it was funny because in my program, Why Wait, on one of a recent coaching call, someone else was having a share, which was almost identical story. And then there was laughing and whatever, because they got it, my normal pain. And then it's like, where along the line did we accept that being in pain, being tired all the time, being cranky is just something that you roll with?
Yep, absolutely. And back in 2009, so my twins were give or take 2 or 3, I went to the doctor saying, I don't know that I remember saying I was fatigued, but I had held on to more weight than I wanted to, and I had changed my diet, and there was something else to do with that I was just, it didn't feel right. I knew there was something not right. I said to her, I think my metabolic system, there's something not right. So she did a whole lot of blood tests, looked at them, and went, you're absolutely fine. Just eat well and exercise, and that's all you need to do. And I'm like, so I went back a year later, and I was eating 1,200 calories a day, which is really restrictive diet-wise. I was riding my bike to and from work multiple days per week, and I think it was 10 kilometers each way, up and down hills. So it was quite a decent travel. I was running anywhere from 5 to 14 Ks 3 times per week, and playing netball. And I was losing maybe 500 grams of weight per month. And that was it. And I went back and I said, I'm doing all of this. What's going on? And she's like, no, you're just a mum of, and I must have had tiredness in there, because she definitely referred to the kids in these visits. Well, you're just a mum, you're going to be tired. You're not losing. It's just who you are. Did the checks again and sent me on my merry way. There was nothing in her training and her scope of skills. And yet years later, when I got mineral testing done, Morley, who I consulted with, he's like, your thyroid was showing signs that it wasn't working back here, because it happened to have the old tests on the current ones that I'd gotten done. And so it suddenly validated that all this time I felt like something wasn't right. And at that point, she could offer me nothing. And that was, that was my experience. And I look back on that as not angry or upset, but that was like when I came to have all the testing done in 2014, that was my time to realize what had been going on. And without the hardship and getting over it that I did in 2012 and 2013 that led me to the testing in 2014, I would never have realized that. And so many other things have come together as a result of that. It's that we are on our own journey and we piece things together. And sometimes it can be a heck of a journey to get to that point. Lots of losses, stresses, sad points, depression, like it just, everybody's journey is different. But those things that get us to that, I'm over it at the apex, it doesn't mean that we're smooth sailing from there either. Has anyone seen that image, the reality of my journey that I'd like to have being a straight line and the actual.
I think that's such a valid point too, because I know for myself and many people I've worked with, we can kind of have this magical thinking. When this happens, then when I lose the weight, I'll be happy and confident. When I meet the man, I'll ride off into the sunset. When I have the house and the kids, everything will be perfect. and then we reach our goal and we're still us. We just have some more in the bank or take up physically less space or now have a bigger sized family, so need a bigger vehicle or whatever it is.
Totally.
And it's kind of like, oh, so many people are like, well, why do I self-sabotage? And it's like, because in some way it's the magic's kind of taken away. And I know for me with eating, it's like, so I've lost all this weight and I'm still not happy or confident. Might as well eat. And it's not conscious. It's just kind of like, I busted my ass for this.
And still don't feel any better.
And
Hang
there's
on.
other people telling you how you should feel. So like one of my biggest pet peeves is like, we do have, everyone has experiences of other people because we see online, or in my case you read their book or you look at their journey and their success and you're like, you must feel. But so often we don't ever ask people how they feel, and if we do, they're fine, thanks, how are you? Like, it's so surface. And it's like the work that both of us do is exploring what's underneath this: minerals, stress, feeling your feelings. And I think so often the work both of us do with people too, when you eat or drink or over exercise or overwork or whatever it is to avoid feeling your feelings, when you stop that behavior, the feelings that you've numbed down, pushed, avoided are going to come up. So you often feel worse before you feel better, which is why I think so many of us avoid these long-term, small, sustainable changes you and I both talk about, because it's like, I feel like shit. Whereas if I go and bust my ass doing some 12-week challenge, at least I'm going to drop 10 kg, not to mention I'm going to gain it all back with interest. But for that time, I can see a result. Whereas these slow changes, it takes time before you see a result.
And they're sustainable and long-term, are likely to stick around, because you start to then change the subconscious things and the self-sabotage things. So many of us don't realize just how much the little actions that we do every day keep us stuck in whatever that lane is that we get stuck in. The mindset of, I'm not good enough to lose weight, or I'm not good enough to change my position financially, my work, my situation with stress, with kids, with health, or with school, or with, like, it doesn't matter what the thing is, but there's little things that we do that contribute to that all the time. And the beauty of what I think we're going to cover during these sessions is becoming self-aware. And as soon as you shine light on those, you can start to make different choices. It's all about choices ultimately. But if you're not aware of the choices that you make, or by not making, someone else makes for you. I was listening to that in a book just in the last 24 hours. And I'm like, oh, it's such a good way of saying it. Because if you have, and I'm self-admitted that I can be very indecisive, my husband even more so. But both of us equally so a lot of the time. Well, someone else is going to force a decision on you. So the more decisive that you can get on what you truly want and sticking to that, it can, and knowing when to back down if you realize that that wasn't the best thing in the long run. Like, what's the worst is sticking to something just because you said it once and you're going to dig in and forevermore, or realizing that, hey, actually I made it, I've learned more and I'm changing my perspective now. But being able to make that choice and be aware of that choice and what we're doing is so powerful.
Yeah. And to add on to that, you don't make the choice once. You make it every single time. Every single time you say no to something, when you really feel like you should say yes because you want to please others, or because you've said yes before, or it won't take that long, or just this once. Every time that you hold that yes or no and back it up, because I think making true lasting change isn't like winning the lotto. And even then, a lot of the studies have said a year later, most lotto winners are actually worse off because they don't know how to steward and care for that money. They've just been given a whole thing and they're like, let's go. So the way that you achieve your goal, the journey, as cliche as it sounds, is the way that you maintain it. So if you bust your ass, go to the gym 4 hours a day, live on kale and broth and, whatever, shakes, and then stop doing those things, the weight will come back. If you're really strict with your budget and say, like, I can't buy anything except this and whatever, and then you're like, oh, blow it, go on a holiday, or Black Friday comes or whatever, like that's the habitual thing. And when your goal does seem so far away, like, owning a house or dropping weight, or, you know, saving, or I'd love to go on a world cruise. There we go. I've admitted it publicly. One day I'm going to go on a world cruise. Probably have to, the kids be a bit older, because I'd prefer to do it child free. That sounds horrible, but can you just watch my kids for 3 months? Sure. But it's like, okay, so, you know, saving up towards it, planning long service, because I've got my own business. There's these things that would just, because we can't, like even starting this podcast, it's like, I want to start a podcast. We didn't just go, okay, hit record and do it tomorrow. There's breaking it down and celebrating every step instead of just when you achieve it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Have you anything else to say for this episode, or should we start wrapping it up?
I reckon we wrap it up. Everyone's got a little bit of insight into how we got here, and just little snippets of who we are and what we might talk about later. So that's what more can we do?
Awesome. So I just wanted to say, if anyone's got any suggestions for episodes or topics you'd like to hear us talk about, please ping one of us an email, and or go to our website and go to the contact form, send it through. We're always open to suggestions. I will not guarantee we'll talk about it, but you 100% ask for what you want and we'll see what we can do. And also, if you've enjoyed this, please give us a review, because that's how the podcasts get found by more people. And like, the mission of people getting over it, as in starting over and making this the last time, so they can have sustainable change to build the life that they actually desire, not the one that is sold to them by influencers, is part of my passion. And I think Kristan's passion, but I don't want to speak on your behalf.
Oh no, you nailed it. That covers me well too.
I love it. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you on the next one.
See ya.